Many business owners, especially those in their early years, misunderstand or they overlook the difference between markup and margin. And in this video, I want to explore what these are, and later I want to show you a real-world example in my business for a project that we recently completed. Before we dive in though, I want to define some terms here. Don't worry, there are only 5 simple terms that you need to understand. The first is gross sales. This is all the sales that you make in a given period. The next is the cost of goods sold. These are the material and labor costs to create or provide the good or service. The next is gross margin or gross profit. It's simply the gross sales minus the cost of goods sold. Now, when I say margin, or gross profit, those all mean the same thing, so I might use those interchangeably here. The next two we'll discuss further in the next video, but I'll touch on them briefly here. The first is operating expenses or overhead, and these are all of the expenses that your business requires to run or to operate. These are things like the rent, the utilities, administrative salaries, etc. And the last is your net profit or net profit margin. It has many names, but this is essentially what the business owners are left with after everything has been paid. Okay, so first let's discuss markup. Markup is a forward-looking metric normally defined as the percentage of cost of sales that is added to the cost of sales to determine the sales price. In order to earn a positive net profit, our markup must be sufficient to cover all of the expenses after the cost of sales. So let's use an example. One that everybody knows, which is when you're a kid, you start a lemonade stand, right? In our markup example, let's say that you want to make a batch of lemonade, exactly 100 cups. And let's say that you estimate the cost of ingredients and the labor to produce that lemonade will be $50. So then you decide you want to double your money. You mark it up 100%. That is, you take 100% of the cost and you add it to your cost to arrive to your price. 100% of $50 is $50, and you mark it up to the cost of $50. That gives you $100 or $1 per cup. Markup is a forward-looking metric because you're making an assumption about a future outcome. You're assuming that you'll be selling exactly $100 worth of lemonade and that your cost of sales will be exactly $50. Now, let's look at gross margin, or simply margin. I discussed it briefly earlier, but margin is an evaluative metric. That means that once we've sold all of our lemonade, we evaluate the margin that we have made. In our example, if our predictions are correct, then we'll find that we've made $50 in gross margin, or a 50% gross margin percentage. The gross margin percentage is calculated as $50 in gross profit divided by $100 of gross sales. So if we mark our cost up 100%, then the estimated gross margin will be 50%. So the above example is a little bit simplified, and markup is really just an estimate of what you want to make. In a more likely scenario, what happens when you get to the end of the day and you only sold $90 worth of lemonade instead of $100? What is the gross margin then? Well, we take our total sales of $90 and we subtract $50 to get a gross profit of $40. Our gross margin percentage is then calculated as the gross profit of $40 divided by total sales of $90, which comes out to around 44%. So the next time that you price your lemonade, you'll have learned to take something like spoilage into account. This is why getting experience and getting started early is so crucial. The first-hand knowledge will teach you what to look out for so that you can achieve the margins that you need to cover expenses and earn a profit. Looking back, we marked our estimated cost of goods sold up 100%. And instead of making our target margin of 50%, we made an actual gross margin of 44%. Let's look at one more calculation. Instead of applying a markup to our cost of sales, let's calculate our price with a particular margin percentage in mind. Let's say we want to make 60% margin on sales. How do we calculate that? Well, we take the total cost of sales and we divide it by 1 minus our target margin. So for simplicity, in this example, let's just say that we have a total cost of sales of $40 and we want to achieve a 60% target margin. To calculate our sales price, we would take $40 and divide it by 1 minus 60%. So that's 40 divided by 0.4, which equals $100. We would have to charge $100 to achieve a 60% gross margin. Okay, so this lemonade stand is a great example for 2 reasons. First, I've explained the math and the mechanics behind markup versus margin. And second, I've also highlighted the fact that this is not real-world application. You will learn, as you navigate through your business, all of the hidden costs affecting your business and how to more accurately price products and services as time goes on. This is the reason it's so important to start as soon as possible and experience the practical application of these concepts. Now let's go to the computer and we'll run through the calculations on a project that we completed about a year ago. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at this project. This is a project that we completed last year. I wanna run the numbers so that you can see how they relate to my business, but these can be applied to really any business that you're looking at. So let's look at the total sales for this project was 1.5 million and total cost for this project was 1,017,000. So let's run the numbers real quick. $1,527,595.08, and we're going to subtract $1,017,659.62. That's the actual amount spent on this project. So that gives us a total gross profit of $509,935.46. And if we divide that by $1,527,595.08, that gives us a gross margin percentage of 33.4%. That's at 0.33. We can multiply this by 100 and you'll see we got 33.38%. That's the gross margin percentage that we made. Now you might think, wow, that's a lot. It's $500,000, but in reality, there's still more money to spend below the line. It's called below the line expenses that we're going to use to determine net profit, right? We've got things like rent, we've got utilities, we've got trucks, we've got trailers, all of those things that we need to spend on to keep the business running. So let's calculate how much we anticipated making, right? So we're going to take $1,528,612.16 and we're going to subtract $992,936.80, and that gives us $535,675.36. And we're going to divide that by 1,528,612.16, and that gives us 35%. I was shooting for a 35% gross margin for this project. This is an example of what you would look at when you're evaluating your sales, your cost of goods sold, and how much money that you make in gross margin. Okay, so let's take a look at it another way. If we take my estimate and we want to figure out how much the markup had to be in order to achieve this 35% gross margin, we can take the total estimate of $1,528,612.16 and we'll subtract our estimated cost, $992,936.80. That gives us a spread of $535,675.36. And if we take that number and we divide it by 992,936.80, that gives us a markup of 53.95%. So that tells us that we need to mark our cost up 53.95%. That's the cost that you have times 1.5395, right? So we're going to take this 992,936.80, and then we're going to multiply it by 1.53948585. That gives us our grand total of $1,528,612.15 So that's how you do markup and margin. That's how those things relate to each other. Okay, so we learned the difference between markup and margin. If you were running your own business, what do you think would be more important to you? Let me know in the comments, and in our next video, we'll explore how to determine net profit and how that will affect setting prices. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.